Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 233 of the podcast. And on this episode of the podcast, I am talking about the Colts naming Jeff Saturday as their interim head coach. This is one of the most shocking coaching hires in the history of the NFL. After losing 26-3 against the New England Patriots, the Colts have fired head coach Frank Reich. Now, if you listened to this podcast a few weeks ago, you would know I agree with him deserving a lot of the blame for the team's downfall. But what I absolutely do not agree with is who are they replacing him with. The Colts have named former Pro Bowl center and current ESPN analyst Jeff Saturday as their interim head coach. So in the last few weeks, the team has replaced a veteran head coach with someone who has no professional football coaching experience and their quarterback with a 6th round draft pick. They've become the most chaotic team in all of football, which is a huge surprise because even when we all knew owner Jim Irsay was a joke, they at least were a respectable organization with Tony Dungy as the head coach, Peyton Manning at quarterback, and Bill Polian running the front office. They were consistent. Yes, they only won one Super Bowl, but they were a model NFL franchise, and Saturday was a big part of that time period. He played for the Colts from 1999 to 2011, making 6 trips to the Pro Bowl. This hiring feels like a desperate attempt to get back to the good old glory days. One would have to imagine they also went to Peyton Manning, because why wouldn't you? You would prefer Peyton Manning over Jeff Saturday if you're going to go for this celebrity type hire, this hire that has some connection to your franchise as a player. And a lot of people have pointed out they also have former wide receiver Reggie Wayne on their coaching staff, so if they wanted to make this kind of hire, they could have picked somebody who, I don't know, was actually already coaching in the NFL for the team. The hiring of ex-players with zero experience as head coaches is a phenomenon I thought would never hit the NFL. In the NBA, the most successful example is Warriors head coach Steve Kerr, who has won 4 rings. On the opposite side of things, you have Jason Kidd with the Nets, who is now a good coach, but when he was with the Nets just out of playing, he wasn't very good at all. The Nets gave him a superstar team with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Joe Johnson, and Darren Williams, and that blew up in their face. And then the Nets did it again when they hired Steve Nash, and I don't want to get into the chaos that's happening with the Nets right now, but I think the two most dysfunctional organizations in sports right now is the Indianapolis Colts and the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are on the more controversial side of things, but for the Colts, you're just wondering, why are they doing the things that they are doing? They're not giving a clear explanation as to why they're benching Matt Ryan or as to why they're moving on from Frank Reich and replacing him with somebody who has no coaching experience. At Saturday's introductory press conference, Jim Irsay said it was a good thing that Jeff Saturday has no coaching experience, and nobody is buying that. It is not a good thing that he doesn't know about the analytics. It's not a good thing that he's underprepared. It is the opposite of a good thing. From looking at it, I think it's obvious what the Colts want from Jeff Saturday. They want a figurehead. They don't want a real head coach. They want somebody who's going to be on board with whatever cockamamie idea the organization has for their future. That's what Jeff Saturday is there to be, a yes man. I just think the NFL head coach should not be a yes man. He should be the one in charge. He should have some real say into what is happening during game day, because it is a pivotal decision. It could be the difference between winning and losing games. Looking at another sport, the most prominent former player with no coaching experience who is a manager is Aaron Boone, who has been semi-successful. It's almost unfathomable to make this kind of hire in football, especially mid-season. We think of football as the sport with the most preparation time. Coaches in the NFL need to be able to manage the clock and challenge a call when necessary, and you don't want someone there you have to babysit. Now, maybe we all should have seen this kind of hire coming in the NFL, because this past offseason, former quarterback Josh McCown was almost hired as the head coach of of the Houston Texans right out of his playing career. They would have made him the head coach, but then the Texans backed down due to probably the backlash of hiring somebody fresh off of playing, and they eventually went with Lovie Smith, who is the safe hire. Now, yes, it's absolutely boring to go with somebody like Lovie Smith. That is a retread hire that's probably not going to work out. My point is, I think you should hire somebody in the middle. You should go after somebody who has not been a head coach before, but has experience as a coordinator, or dare I say coaching experience in the NFL at all. I don't like retread hires. They don't really work out. You don't want to hire somebody who's already coached 3 NFL teams. You should go for a fresh face. A lot of the best teams in the NFL have a guy who was a first-time hire. Sean McVay with the Rams is the best example. You also have Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. These guys were not head coaches before they were given that opportunity. And I mean, this offseason, if you can get a guy like Sean Payton, then you should absolutely do it, because he's the guy who just retired from football. I would absolutely want Sean Payton to be a coaching candidate, especially for the Indianapolis Colts. I think that would be an ideal hire. But is Sean Payton going to want to walk in to what's going on with the Indianapolis Colts? That is something that's not being discussed enough about this situation, is what this is doing to the reputation of the organization, because now they fired an established head coach that a lot of people admire in Frank Reich and replaced him with somebody who a week ago was talking on TV about other teams playing in the NFL. A lot of people, and rightfully so, are going to have a huge issue with that. These kind of moves, hiring Jeff Saturday as your head coach, feel like a celebrity hire, like the Colts are only bringing in Saturday because the fan base knows who he is. It's my belief you should be a coordinator on the offensive or defensive side of the ball before you are given any head coaching opportunities. Over the past week since this move has been made, I've heard a lot of football minds I respect try to say things like the Colts are making a creative hire here. The point being, their season is over and done with, and I get what they are saying, but the last thing you want to be in the NFL is a laughingstock. And also, think about how the players must feel about this move. A man who every Monday goes on TV and gives his opinion on the league is now your boss. How is that going to sit with Jonathan Taylor, Stephon Gilmore, or Shaq Leonard? They, of course, will respect Jeff Saturday's pedigree as a player. He's played behind some of the best quarterbacks of all time in Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers, but how could they have faith in him as an NFL head coach? The other fascinating element of the story is how the people at ESPN have reacted to this story, and it's been interesting. They've all said things like Jeff Saturday is a great guy, but they're really not on board with this hire. I mean, to see a media company deal with the fact that one of their colleagues has been now named an NFL head coach is pretty wild. But that's one of my issues with this hire. I think this is the type of hire that's made so you will talk about it. I feel like I'm almost doing what the Colts want me to do, which is to talk about them hiring Jeff Saturday, and I almost don't want to give them that satisfaction, but I think it's too big of a story to ignore. There's a lot of elements to the story. Many people, including ESPN's Stephen A. Smith, has brought up the fact over the Rooney Rule about how this really doesn't look good hiring an unproven white man, but then others have said that the Rooney Rule does not apply to interim hires. And I'll say this about this. If you are mad about this hire, you should absolutely be mad about it. I don't understand the people saying we shouldn't get upset about it until he's named the full-time head coach. That's not how this works. Interim or not, right now, Jeff Saturday is the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and I find that to be inexcusable. There's absolutely no reason for this man to be in charge of a football team, no matter how short of a time period it's going to end up being. And I think we all know if he ends up going undefeated for the rest of the season, he's probably going to be named the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Why should I have to wait to be upset about this hire, which I think is laughable? The NFL is one of the last sports where we really all respect who the head coach of these teams are. Like, I'm a Patriots fan. I respect Bill Belichick because he outcoaches his opponents. I think that matters. He is able to beat bad coaching routinely. There are other guys I really respect, like Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh. The NFL has some excellent head coaches, and I think this kind of hire makes you rethink that. If this works, works out, I'm going to lose respect for NFL head coaching, and I don't think that's something that the sport should want. And I get there are some people who are going to say it doesn't matter until he ends up winning, and I get that winning will solve this, but still, what would feel better? The Colts winning with an unproven Jeff Saturday, or them hiring a guy who has been a long-time assistant? Like, we all just celebrated the fact that Dusty Baker won his first World Series after managing over 20 plus years in Major League Baseball. That felt great because Dusty Baker had done the work. There's something about that I still really respect. I love long-time coaches, and I think a long-time NFL coach who has not yet been given an NFL head coaching opportunity should be the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Jeff Saturday was an excellent NFL offensive lineman. He was a great center. If you made him the offensive line coach, I'd have no issue with it because I think he could really add something to it. What can Jeff Saturday add as the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts? Absolutely nothing of value at this moment. He hasn't coached college. He did coach high school. That means absolutely nothing to me. He is not qualified to be one of the 32 head coaches in the NFL. It's as simple as that. And let's just for a second act like this is all in the name of tanking. They don't need Jeff Saturday to do that. They are an awful team. If they just want to continue losing, they should have just kept Reich as their head coach until the offseason started. This feels like a weird experiment to where if he wins, they can look good, and if he loses, they can move on and act like they had no plans of naming him the long-term coach of the franchise. I don't like this experiment. I don't think being a coach in the NFL should be an experiment. If you fire a head coach mid-season, one of your assistants should be the interim head coach of the football team. I've also heard some people say this, they don't want one of their assistants to coach this team and look really bad on their resume. They do not care about their coaching assistant's resume. They care about the fact that Jeff Saturday is a known commodity. They are using his name, and Jeff Saturday himself should know better. They don't want him to be an NFL head coach. They want him to be the celebrity face of the team. That's what this is, because Indianapolis Colts fans have a relationship with Jeff Saturday. I have so many questions as to why Jeff Saturday himself would want this job at all. It's going to be a thankless job, and if it's just to tank, then what's the point? I understand his loyalty to the organization. He was a long-term member of the Indianapolis Colts as a player, but coaching in the NFL is a different type of animal. He is going to get the whole blame for being the face of this team. People are going to want him to fail. He's going to end up regretting this, especially if it blows up in his face. And being a head coach is not sounding good at a press conference. Yes, all of his press conferences so far have sounded really impressive. He's a charismatic figure. That's not what being a head coach in the NFL is about. Being a head coach in the NFL is about, should I go for it on fourth down? And would anyone trust Jeff Saturday to make that kind of decision? I think the Colts think they're being very clever by using the term interim head coach. Like, they're using that and they're thinking, we're not going to get mad because, we're not going to name him our full-time head coach. What they don't understand is that this is going to make them the target of so many people's anger over the fact that this guy is not ready to be an NFL head coach. We don't care that he has the interim tag. We are going to treat him like he should be an NFL head coach, and we are going to treat him the exact same way we would treat any NFL head coach that fails miserably. And a lot of people are rooting for his failure as head coach because they're laughing at this story. Think about this. Even people who were coordinators in the NFL have struggled to become head coaches. Josh McDaniels, for my money, is one of the best offensive coordinators in the NFL, but his stint with Denver did not work out, and he's up to a really rough start with the Raiders. Even proven assistants don't always make good head coaches. So how on earth is Jeff Saturday supposed to walk in mid-season and be a good head coach? He's just being a figurehead, and I have a really big issue with that. This to me is a high-risk, low-reward type of signing. So what happens if Jeff Saturday, let's say he has a winning record for the rest of the season, and then they name him the full-time head coach? Guess what? People are still going to have a massive issue with that. There's no reason for Jeff Saturday to be an NFL head coach at this moment. Make him an assistant, teach him the ropes if you want him to be a head coach in the future, but making him an interim head coach in a season where your team is terrible is the worst idea the Colts have ever had as an organization. The last thing an NFL head coach should be is a yes man, and I think Jeff Saturday is absolutely about to turn into a yes man, because how could he be anything else otherwise? He has no history of making key decisions in NFL games. This isn't a no harm, no foul type of situation. The reputation of the Colts is in shambles right now. This was once a proud football organization. Like I said earlier, they've always had a joke of an owner, but they've always been really good. They've always had a star quarterback. They've always had a consistent head coach, at least somebody you respect, a Chuck Pagano type, a Bruce Arians type, a guy who can win football games. Jeff Saturday, it's not just that he's unproven, it's that he's not qualified at all. The other teams in the league are going to want to make him look bad, and they're going to want to make the Colts look bad, because I think the Colts are making the league look really bad by making this kind of hire, by making this figurehead type hire as their NFL head coach. It's a respected decision, and even really good coaches in college have failed at it. Nick Saban didn't work out as an NFL head coach. I mean, the list goes on and on. You would think if all people could prove it, Nick Saban, he was a defensive coordinator in the NFL. It didn't work out with the Miami Dolphins. How is it going to work out with Jeff Saturday and the Colts? It's not going to work out. It's not worth doing this kind of coaching hire. And the funniest thing about it is during that press conference, all Jim Irsay could talk about was the past of the Colts, how they've been one of the better top-tier NFL franchises. If you are bringing up your past in a press conference about your new head coach, that tells you everything about how you feel about this hire. The Colts themselves know this isn't going to work out. Just name some coordinator that we've never heard of as your interim head coach, win 1 or 2 games for the rest of the season, and then start to rebuild. Go after a franchise quarterback. Go after, maybe replace your GM, because Chris Ballard absolutely just isn't it right now. The roster's not that good outside of the quarterback situation and now the ridiculousness that's going on with the head coach. And hope you can hire somebody like a Sean Payton type in the offseason, or if not, go after a young defensive or offensive coordinator and name them your head coach. Jeff Saturday is not the long-term answer, and that's my biggest issue with this problem. The Colts are always looking for the short-term fix at quarterback, and now when it comes to head coach, look for the long-term answer. You know you're not going to be able to develop Jeff Saturday into a 10-year NFL head coach. It just isn't going to happen. The man who deserves 90% of the blame for this hire is Jim Irsay, because he's living in the past when it comes to the Colts. He's talking about their past of being one of the best consistent NFL franchises. He's making a nostalgic type hire at head coach. No one else would think of Jeff Saturday as a coaching candidate, and the only reason you do is because he played for you as a Pro Bowl center. Consultants for your team don't go from consulting to being the main head coach of your organization, to being the face of your organization. This kind of move has never happened in the history of football, and there's a reason for that. Irsay, for me, has become a very confusing figure in the NFL. On one hand, he has very high expectations for his team. He's moving on from quarterbacks routinely because he thinks the team should be a contender. But then on the other hand, he's naming Jeff Saturday as the head coach of his team. He's an owner who definitely needs to be less involved in what's happening with his NFL franchise. If the team is ever going to get back on track, they need to stop making these kind of poor decisions. And I don't even care if Jeff Saturday goes on a run and starts to win games. I will not change my opinion on this. This is absolutely the worst coaching hire in recent memory. I don't care if Jeff Saturday wins his first 5 games. He is not qualified to be a head coach in the NFL, and I don't feel good about this hire, and I never will. We'll see how it all plays out, but no one can be feeling good about this. Any coaching opportunity, even an interim one, should be given to a qualified, deserving candidate, and that's just not Jeff Saturday. We all want to think a football coach is more than a figurehead. This kind of hire puts that idea in jeopardy. This so-called experiment of hiring an analyst to be your head coach is something I hope my team never does. My biggest issue with the Colts hiring Jeff Saturday is it feels like they no longer respect the position of head coach, even though their success is because of a head coach in Tony Dungy. He was one of the best head coaches in the NFL. He had experience with the Buccaneers. That team went on to win a Super Bowl. He was experienced. He went to the Colts, and then he won a Super Bowl. They have been rewarded in the past by hiring a deserving candidate, and now they're hiring a virtual unknown whose resume is an ESPN analyst. That is unforgivable. The players on that team and that fan base deserves better. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.